Welcome to the Growth Whisperers website, where everything that we talk about is building enduring great companies. Companies that will last, companies that you keep and that you enjoy working at, and it gives you fulfillment. I'm Brad Giles, and as always today, I'm joined by my co-host, Kevin Lawrence. Hi, Kevin. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Brad. It's a wonderful cloudy day here in White Rock, British Columbia, just outside of Vancouver where I am. At least it's fairly warm. And I'd say I'm doing very good.
Oh, good. Yes, it got to 9 degrees here today. We're heading towards winter. Yeah, well, as a minimum, Celsius, obviously. It's starting to get a little bit cooler in this part of the world. So tell me, what is your word or phrase or thought of the day? We're doing that obviously because we encourage teams to do that. Have a word to begin your meetings.
My phrase is being humbled by masters. Being humbled by masters. Had an experience, which we'll talk about as we get more into the show today, but had an experience of doing something new that I was trying, and I wasn't doing great. It's an area that I've been quite masterful at in the past, stepped up to another level, and I wasn't. And then I had a master show me how it was really done in some very humbling ways. And it was awesome. It was seriously awesome. So it was the joy of being humbled by a master, I think, probably to put it more succinctly, or more clearly. How about you? What's your phrase or your word today?
I'd say it's serene or calm, like just calm, I would say. And that's just because I spent the weekend, it's Monday morning for us as we record. I spent the weekend in the southwest of our state in a winter retreat, I guess you'd say, in the bush. A bit of rain, but beautiful, just beautiful and calm.
Awesome. Yeah. So beautiful and calm while you're being humbled by masters. There we go. Sewing it all together today.
That works well. In terms of today's subject, which is something that I think we're both pretty passionate about, why finding the best advisors will help you quadruple your IQ.
Yeah, and it's a logical thing that to get the best advisor you can, but we often find that when people are in the middle of figuring things out, they actually normally try to figure it out versus tapping the shoulder of a master. There's this instinct that many people have is to do it yourself, home bake it, DIY. There's all these phrases for it. And we're kind of reinforcing or going against that natural instinct to figure it out on your own, to try and flip the instinct to maybe making your default who is the most masterful person that we could ask in these more high stakes or more challenging situations. So instead of the default, let's get down to it and figure it out. Default getting to how do we tap into a real master, because then we'll more likely, more quickly make a better decision or better move.
So you've got a phrase that you use for this, Kevin. We've certainly spoken about this on the podcast before. Tell us about that phrase and how you came to develop that phrase or to coin that phrase.
Yeah, I call it 14X advisors, or I call them 14Xers. And the idea behind it is instead of, and we'll just take, I've seen too many situations where my clients got bad advice, like really bad, good intentioned people, but really bad advice in many, many areas. But, I think particularly of some legal advice that one of my clients got. And, there was a brother-in-law who was a lawyer. And so he went, but his brother-in-law was like a generalist lawyer with like 3 years experience. And it's nothing against 3 years experience, but 3 years experience isn't the same as 33 years of experience. And 3 years of generalist experience is not the same as 3 years of specialist experience, which is not even a fair comparison to 33 years of specialist experience. And this was an HR matter about a long-term employee and some bad things that happened, and they had to clean it up. And in the end, it all worked out, but it went down the wrong road because the brother-in-law with 3 years of journalist experience gave him some advice, but there was a few key things he didn't know. And it made a complete mess.
Yeah.
And so from that point, it was interesting back in the day. And then, I got, racetrack on the mind, not surprisingly, but there's another guy that I met at the track that I was going with, who was a specialist HR matters lawyer. That's what he did.
Yeah.
And so I ended up connecting him with that lawyer who cleaned up the situation and got it handled properly. So yeah, that was just the 14X advisor. And when we think about it, if we're going to go and climb Mount Kilimanjaro or Mount Everest, I got a buddy who's done a bunch of hiking, and I wouldn't ask him. You want to do the person that had summited Everest or Kilimanjaro 17 times.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're going to fly, we're talking about pilots not on the weekend. If you're going to fly in horrible weather, you don't want the pilot that's got 500 hours of experience or 200. You want the pilot who's got 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 hours of experience, as an example. We know this in everything. So the key is, and we want to give people a shot, but let's let them learn and make their, cut their teeth and make their mistakes somewhere else. So the rule of thumb is, have they been there and done that 14 times before successfully and not theoretically? That's what we're looking for. Masterful experience.
Yeah. And it really speaks to the title, or to clarify the title, will help you quadruple your IQ. So what we're really saying there is, you can get advisors that are at a competent level, but when you're looking for an advisor in any field, you really should be saying, who is the person that is the 14X, to use your phrase, is the person who's been there, done that, and they're not only experienced, but they're masterful. They are able to see it with absolute clarity, all of the situations, and they can draw on multiple points of experience. Well, when we did it with that organization or person, that's what happened. And when we did it with this one, that's what happened. So lots and lots and lots of competence to help you to be able to make the best decisions. And I guess to get the return on input or effort or investment in these advisors is enormous if you get the right one. The difference can be multiplied so much.
Yeah, and that's the most important. So, for example, I shared with you recently, I'm learning to drive this new race car.
Yeah,
and it's called a Radical, which is it's like a couple steps down from like a Formula One car, not as fast, and it's the same kind of a design, but it's not open wheels, so that when you're racing, you're less likely to catch wheels, because open wheel cars are dangerous to race, because if you catch a wheel, it's bad. So, but say underneath, it's all very the same, very, very fast. And I'm learning how to drive them. A couple of my buddies already know how to drive them, and I've only done sports car racing before, so it's a different technique. These cars have a lot of downforce. It's a different driving technique. So I go out, do some practice, do it as fast as I can, and I'm still at least 6 seconds off the pace. And in racing, that's a lot. So there's this young guy at the track, and I think I mentioned him on a previous podcast. Young guy at the track who has won, the World Go-Karting Championship, or it's called the Super Nats in Las Vegas. It's basically the fastest racers from all of North America. He's won that. He's competed in Indy Lights in Indy. His name's Zach. Awesome guy. So I had him out in my car with me, because I know I need to pick up these 6 seconds. And I talked about the getting humbled because on our first time I drove my car, I spun it. This first time out with him, I think I spun it, and then it wouldn't start again. And which is obviously, that's not fun to do in a racetrack. But as I'm driving it, I'm having problems. And I said to him, so why did I spin? He goes, oh, you stayed on the brakes too long. He had this simple, 5 words that and then he just described one thing. So of all the things that I was probably doing wrong, he picked one skill only. Yeah. And that one skill would open the door to all 6 seconds. He figured out the one thing.
Yeah.
And so You got to be a master to be able to see it and break it down like that. And then secondly, later on, he took me for a ride in my car so I could feel what it feels like at the limit and what the car does. So that's like shadowing a master, or, really seeing what they do, which again is absolutely mind-blowing. Funny thing is, he's never driven one of these cars before.
Yeah.
Never been on a racetrack before. He's never been on this track yet, but he's a master of driving all kinds of different cars on all kinds of different tracks. And he figured it out real fast. But the point of it is that I didn't get the direction from my buddies who are good, because they know they can drive fast.
Yeah.
But they don't have the experience of different people and different tracks and different cars to be able to, and maybe they would have found it. Yeah. But I found the guy who guaranteed would. So not only he gave me that piece of advice, plus then he gave me the experience of what mastery looks and feels like.
Yeah.
And I got it. And I went up and I've already picked up, I went out 2 times. Yeah, 2 times. And I picked up 3 of the 6 seconds. So I've already closed half the gap after, 4 sessions with him learning. And then on my own, without even him being there, I've already closed half the gap until I wiped out again, spun again. As I was chasing my buddies down, I spun again and I broke something. And then I got humbled again, Brad. It was awesome because my car wouldn't start. Supposedly with these cars, when you wipe out and spin, you got to step on the clutch. Otherwise it breaks the starter. Which I did. So I got to be stranded in the middle of the track. And then the truck had to come out and tow me all the way in again. So, got to work with masters, but got to be very, very humbled. So the point of it is, we're very fortunate to have access to those masters. And I said, hey, can you help me?
Yeah.
And that's really what it comes down to, and sure, there's a cost, but based on the benefit, it's kind of being willing to, who's the best? Hey, can you help me? But let's make sure that they're a 14Xer before you ask for the help.
Yeah. I had a similar yet different experience lately. I was working with a team, and unfortunately, one of the companies that they work with, one of their suppliers, let's say, who are vital, were going into administration. They were going under, and we had an early warning to this. And this was going to have a material impact on the business. It's going to cost a lot of money to this particular organization. And so we sat down with the leadership team and we went on to a call pretty much immediately with a lawyer. That team didn't use that lawyer normally. And they were gaming all of the questions that we need to ask the lawyer beforehand. And I just said, look, how experienced, we don't know this lawyer. How experienced is this lawyer in this situation? Have they handled company collapses from this perspective before? And the team was like, oh, we hadn't really thought about that. And what the driver behind that was this 14X concept, because I'm thinking, well, maybe we've engaged, but we've got to ensure that we've got the best so we can ensure the best outcome. Anyway, then we went on to the call, and the CEO, it was one of the first questions. Hi, lawyer, how are you going? Tell us about your experience before. Like, what have you done in this realm? And the lawyer responded by saying, okay, well, I dealt with this collapse and that collapse and this and this and this, and clearly established themselves as an expert pretty much immediately. And everyone in the room got a great sense of comfort around that, which was fantastic. Because then they just jumped in straight away and trusted everything that the lawyer said.
Correct.
So, perfect. The power.
And that's how it should be done. It's confirming up front. And we have a saying in the West, it's not their first rodeo.
Yeah.
Right. That they've been there before, and everyone wants to pretend. And I'd even encourage you like that, using a bit of the top grading methodology, dig in and pressure test a little bit, ask a few facts. Yeah. What was your role in that case? Yeah. Were you the lead partner? Or were you the researcher? I mean, you would ask it respectfully. That's not a respectful way to do it, but really let's find out. It's like, if someone's telling you that they're winning, about their winning race car experience, confirm they were the driver.
Yeah.
Right. And confirm there was other cars in the race.
Yeah.
There wasn't I'm exaggerating, but it's just, you want to validate and also, because then you're also setting them up to win, because they don't want to have an unhappy client, and the best people probably will. So that's the idea of those 14 Xers. And, it kind of takes you to the first point we listed here is, you really want to instantly, when you've got something of high value you're trying to figure out, not, how do I tie my shoes? But who should be the first question. And that's something Jim Collins has, beat into our heads. Your first question is a who question. And then the second is, who's the best? So who and best. And, one of my clients calls that the billionaire mindset. When you look at stuff from being a billionaire, you're automatically going to think who, because you can't do it alone, because you got too much going on, most likely, if you made the money. And then you can afford the best. So of course you're only going to look for the best. So that's the first thing is, who is it? Who can help? And let's just make sure that they are the absolute best. So I got, one client here in Vancouver, and I'm grateful that when he reached out to someone and asked for someone to help in terms of coaching to scale their company, that was his exact approach. He asked for the best. And this person said, for what he was looking for, that I was, which is very flattering. And he nicely reminds me of that once in a while. That doesn't hurt to hear that. But that's his strategy. I've worked with him on a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And his thing is, when we're looking for advisors, is always, who is the absolute best we can find in North America? Because that's where they are. And he'll just pick up the phone and call anyone.
Yeah.
And ask them for their help. And he's happy to pay for it. But he said to me, and we talked about it, the reality is, the best doesn't cost that much more.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't cost more. And whatever it is, sometimes it doesn't cost that much more. But if you have an important enough project or decision, the cost will more than wash out by getting the best advice you can get.
And the best advice that you can get matters, because it's the nuances in these sort of situations where you need an advisor that can make a huge difference when amplified. So it could be, a standard or a competent advisor could give you standard or competent advice, but it goes without saying that a 14X advisor is going to give you more nuanced, considered, experience-backed advice that will give you a better chance of having either a significant chance of success or a higher return on that investment. And that, I love that billionaire mindset. I mean, it really says, if money wasn't an option, what would I do? If I needed to get the best advice, what would I do? And they don't get to be a billionaire by penny pinching. So it's not about spending, if you're a $1 million company and you say, let's go to the big four and we'll get them to, spend $950,000 with them this year, we will. That's not obviously going to work. We're kind of looking beyond that. It's got to be within your budget to a degree.
Yes.
But getting the best that you possibly can within that budget.
Getting the smartest person you can afford. It's no different than when you're hiring people on your team. You want to hire the most competent people you can, the best people you can for what you're offering. But we just got to take it, really seriously with advisors. And, interestingly, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but it's, the fit is important. So, the billionaire mindset, I often bring that up with clients, and it's about whether it's work in your company for yourself, often around your health and your mental performance, and your life, who getting the best darn people you can. And I look at our most successful clients, and in all areas, work, self, and life, they are looking for the best darn help they can get so that they can have a great life and be healthy and thrive at work. So surround yourself with the best. So who is the right person, and then get the best, and then reach out to them. And, this takes us to number 2, where, those of you that might be penny pinchers, and saving money is a good thing. You just got to save it in the right areas. But because cheap help turns out to be very expensive, right? Cheap help, if they don't know, and again, we're not talking about something that's inconsequential. We're talking about important decisions. But if they don't have the experience or the quality or the reputation because of weird things that they do or whatever it happens to be, but so we got to think cheap help is expensive because they can guide you to make the wrong decisions. Smart help doesn't normally cost that much more, but the kicker, many masters will help for free. And this is something that very few people leverage. But again, CEOs I work with that do leverage, what they will do is they will pick up the phone and they will call another CEO.
Yeah.
And they'll reach out, whether it's their network or their network's network, or it's just cold. They will literally say, here's a person, let's pick up the phone and let's talk to them. And I want to ask them because I know they went through the same thing. Do you know how many times people will work with them?
All the time.
Like CEO calls CEO, COO calls COO, head of marketing calls, head of marketing for one brand calls a head of marketing for another, even when they're competitors.
Yeah.
Like the amount of collaboration I'm not going to give the industry or the trade secrets, but the amount of collaboration I have seen shocks me. The big thing that I've noticed though is most people won't pick up the phone and ask or send an email and ask.
Yeah.
But many people that have been, so we were working on a project recently and we're working on structure and organization. And, the COO and the equivalent of the COO weren't really clear on it, what was right. They just reached out to 5 people, a couple through their network. Like I know in one case, I connected them with one and then through their network and they just went and talked to 5 other people. And then it validated what they were feeling. Boom. Now they could have hired a consultant. That's another option, but they just called people in the businesses and they got some amazing direction. So you can get it. You can get great help, but don't forget to call basically your peers. And that's the value of networking. And that's the part that for people that aren't able to do conferences right now, that's missing. Because when you're at a conference, you can meet those people and you could have a beverage or a meal or a chat. And then you'd be able to dig and ask some of that stuff and have a relationship. So now you just got to, reach out. But that's anyways, I guess it's, who's the master, who's someone who's been through this, that's a peer you can reach out to.
So cheap help is expensive. I want to give you a quick example of that. I know a person and they are selling their property, investment property, just a unit thing. Market's really hot. There are 150 people lining up to rent a house type of hot.
Wow.
And, we're seeing that, in several cities around the world, depending where you are. But this person's selling their property and they're complaining to me about how the property isn't selling. They're like, it's been on for this amount of time and it's not selling. And I'm like, well, what have you done? And they started at this price and they've dropped it a bit more based on, I guess the agent's advice, and it's not selling, and they're getting a couple of people through, but it's not selling. And I'm like, okay. So then I go onto the listing and I have a look at it and I look at the agent. And the first thing that strikes me is the agent doesn't have a photo on the listing of themselves, a headshot. Okay, that's a bit strange. So then I click on there and I look and they don't have any reviews. Okay. And then I look a bit further and then their email address is kind of the equivalent of a Gmail account. Okay.
Credibility is dropping by the click. Confidence is dropping by the click.
Yeah. Go to their website is just atrocious. Like it was made 20 years ago. And and then the kicker, I go to LinkedIn and I put their name in, and the person is a school teacher at the local school as well. And yeah, so you want to know.
So if you were looking for a tutor for your children, that person might have been a great choice.
Yeah.
But as a real estate agent, when all real estate agents are paid equally, And they pick the school teacher who doesn't understand marketing and makes themselves look like an amateur.
Yeah. And so cheap help is expensive. Now, all I can guess is that the person got a cheaper price. They got it, at a
or
cheaper,
it was a family member or
a friend or something. I don't know, but
or they didn't look.
It delegitimizes the complaints about why the property isn't selling. But you know what? Like the great retort to that is cheap help is expensive.
Yes. And why, the thing is, it doesn't cost you more to go to a different agent, even if you did get a slight discount.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great example, Brad.
Yeah.
So cheap help is example. And so we'll go into the third one, only 14Xers, only people that have been there, done that, got the t-shirt, right? And that, because that experience, like we all know how hard it is to learn by experience. It's expensive, it's painful. And I was talking on the weekend with a friend of mine who's looking at an investment. And he was telling me about this investment. I said, it sounded like an interesting investment opportunity, but I just asked a couple of questions. The guy running it, this investment, who's going to run the company, how many times has he done this kind of transaction before? 0. Okay. And it's transactions in other countries. The second thing is, how many times has he done businesses in those other 2 countries? I think it was 1. And then I said, there's a couple other questions that I asked, but this was the first guys. Oh, and how many times has he done transactions of this size? 0. So it was a new business, big transactions, new countries, like it's, and just from an investment perspective, right? When you invest in the people that are running the investment, but this is the guy's first try. So not an advisor, just from an investment.
Yeah.
I know from a bit of experience, that's a good way to lose some money, unfortunately. But it's the same principles. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. That's what you're looking for. And, the thing is that they've done it in a similar space or a space with similar dynamics. So for example, if it's a lawyer, laws are different in different countries, right? And maybe they've done that kind of contract, but it's on a contract between 2 companies in the same country. But if this one is, a contract between Canada and Australia, and they've never done that kind of international law, again, that could be a potential glitch. So outside of so 14X are on the deal, and even the market and the environment, all of those things, been there, done that is worth it. So we've got that. We talked about how it's just kind of like top grading. Anything you want to add on that, Brad, before we go to number 4?
Well, the top grading principles very specifically that we want to highlight at this point is when we're top grading, when we're using that methodology, it's someone who is in the top 10% of candidates that are available at the price that you're offering, right? At the price that you're paying. And it's the same with advisors. You could have 10 advisors, all of them are charging the same amount. And one of those will be better than the other ones. Now that's kind of obvious, but who is the one of those that is going to be the 14Xer? Or who is the one that's going to make the biggest difference with you? And this really, I guess, segues into number 4, because the third point to that is that who is the one of those that's going to fit like a glove, right? Who is the one that is going to feel like when you're working with them, they're really complimenting you, they're helping and they're hurting you. They're really challenging your beliefs. And you think, without that additional brain experience, perspective, belief set, I wouldn't be able to make the right decisions, or as considered decisions, perhaps. It's so important that this person will fit like a glove. When I work with people, I've got this simple phrase that I say, if we were role-playing, Kevin, I would say, we've got to work together before we're engaged. We've got to work together to try to figure out, is it worth working together? And let's keep doing that until it doesn't make sense for us not to work together.
Yeah, okay. And I do something similar. I tell people when I'm talking to them, and our whole firm does, is that fit is critical. And I say that we need to be able to debate like brothers or sisters, or brothers and sisters, and work through issues and come out, feel strong, give each other a hug at the end. Like it's critical. And I was talking about this with Zach, my racing coach, and and we were talking about another guy that runs a kart racing team, Craig, and we're talking about the fit between a race driver and a race engineer. The race engineer sets up all the car and makes all the little adjustments. And what we talked about is, there's been situations where a driver will have a not quite technically as good engineer, but could get better results.
Yeah.
Because that engineer and a driver can communicate. It's like they can finish each other's sentences. And the driver says something, and he might not explain it right, but the engineer knows exactly what that means.
Yeah.
And so they got this symbiotic relationship where it works, where you could have technically a better engineer, but the driver and the engineer, they grit each other like sandpaper, and it just doesn't produce the same results. So, that's in that scenario. But in business, if you look at advisors or people that you work with, you feel it.
Yeah.
Right? Do you feel the fit? And what that is, and I like how you said there, it's help and hurt. You get the advice in a way where it sticks and it works for you, and then you're able to go do it, because technically giving you the right advice is very different than you being able to hear it and receive it in a way where you can act on it. So that fit. And that's why even with clients where I give a little bit of test, like I test giving people some feedback and coaching them in my style and see how it works.
Yeah.
And because I have a certain approach, and I am not the right coach for everyone, nor are you. There's a certain style, certain approach, certain beliefs, and it works really well for some people and not for others. And you gotta test or get a sense of that.
Imagine if a lawyer wouldn't challenge you. Yeah. Imagine if a lawyer, you engaged a lawyer, a type of advisor, and imagine if that lawyer said to you, I definitely recommend that you don't do that. And you didn't listen, or imagine to reverse that, if they didn't say that, or imagine if a lawyer would never challenge you and would never say to you, I don't recommend that you do that. They would just nod their head and smile and sort of agree with you. That is not a good advisor.
No. Or if they had like a weird Australian accent. That could like drive you insane. I'm joking. I like the Australian accent. But the point, like for example, like the lawyer that I work with, Darcy, he's an awesome guy. Great to work with. Darcy talks faster than I talk. And I love it because the conversations move and we figure stuff out. And what I know is that when I have a conversation, we figure stuff out and I come away better than after a conversation. And that's a great measure for fit. You come away feeling better than, like you've taken a notch up. But with Darcy, he talks really fast. If I had a lawyer who was equally as capable as Darcy, but talked slow and like it would, I listen to audiobooks at 1.5 speed or 1 3/4 speed. So forget the technical capability, forget the emotional wavelength. Even the speed of his speech actually makes a different for fit with me because I like the fast paced and direct, right? And again, so everyone's got different variables of what they need to work well with someone. The key is, when you've got a great fit and when someone that you work with drives you bonkers.
Yeah.
And you got to cut a bit of slack for everyone. Nobody's perfect, but generally it should be a good fit and you should feel energized and like you made solid progress whenever you talk to that person.
Yeah. Because the initial concept is that they will quadruple your IQ. So if you're stuck, they may be incredibly intelligent, yet incredibly annoying, right? So if you're stuck and have a blockage around any of those things where it's not a good fit, then they're not going to quadruple your IP.
Because you're not even going to call them. Or if you do, you're not going to listen. Or if you do listen, you might not get it. Or if you do get it, you might feel less compelled to do it. Like, it's just, at the end of the day, you deserve the best. It's okay to have the best. And if advisor isn't delivering what you need, you can ask for something different. That's okay. You should. And if they can't deliver it, it's perfectly acceptable to move on. Right. And we'll talk about that, we'll talk about that a little bit later on about doing that. But yeah, it's super important. The fit is almost everything. That's why I recommend, have a few conversations, right? Don't just pick, especially if it's an ongoing thing or a project, interview, and you'll have a sense. Confirm the data is the 14X, and then the feeling is the fit. So kind of different formats you can have advisors. Informal, formal, and we'll talk about advisory boards. Informal is just people that you brainstorm stuff by. I've got a guy that you and I both know in the Middle East, Ed. Ed and I had a brainstorm. He had a question, and we had a brainstorm. By the way, he ended up sharing some stuff with me that we'll talk about in a future show about the way structure of companies is changing, and some leading edge companies. It was awesome. So anyway, we always have these brainstorms, and we both kind of, come up with better ideas. So Ed and I chat on a regular basis, and stuff comes up just like you and I do. And I've got a whole suite of people that I always brainstorm with. But then there's formal advisors. Those are people you hire. Maybe you have them on retainer. Maybe it's a coach or someone that does strat planning with you, or a HR consultant or a lawyer, or someone who helps you raise money, or someone, who knows, right? There's all the formal. And those would be like formal one-on-one people that you work with on projects or ongoing. And then there's, advisory boards, which we'll talk about a little bit, but they show up in many, and all are good. Informal's a great thing to do. Formal, you need those. And then advisory boards that we'll dig into a bit more. Go ahead, Brad.
But the principle applies across the establishment of these groups. Informal, formal, and advisory boards. There was a scathing article in the business news, the Australian business newspaper called the Financial Review. I think it was this weekend, certainly maybe last weekend for listeners, but certainly recently. And they were just saying that everyone on boards, asterisk, not every single person, many people on boards are there just about governance and protecting their own seat, and they're not challenging the CEOs to do the CEO's job. So it's this cozy little club where everyone is just trying to do their own thing, and all they're trying to do is protect their seat at the board table.
Right.
So there's no healthy debate, and there's no challenging. And so
if that's what your board is, change it. That is more like a vanity exercise than a value-added exercise.
Yeah. And they were naming names, and it was interesting. But the point is, are those people 14X advisors, to use your phrase again? Are those board members? Because in listed companies, it's the same as well. You've got to have a high quality team that's going to challenge you, that's got deep experience, and that fit like a glove.
Yeah. And sometimes if your board isn't adding a lot of value or challenging you, it could be the CEO's responsibility, or even the chairman's responsibility, to help set the right agendas or conversations. Because the board has a governance role to kind of protect, the company on behalf of the shareholders.
Yeah.
But the CEO needs some help with some stuff. So where I have seen CEOs leverage, whether it's boards or advisory boards, the CEO sometimes will come with some challenges. One CEO I work with wanted a board. He set up a governance board in a family business that didn't need a governance board. Advisory board would have been fine, but he wanted a governance board so he felt more accountable. And he also recruited some of the best people he could. I mean, there's a retail tech startup, and they were recruiting people from Amazon and Alibaba. Like, they wanted the best. Wow. So they had tech people and then some traditional retail people from massive retailers. And they hired a firm to help them find the best directors they could. But the CEO would bring problems to the board. Like, hey, board, I need help. But he took the responsibility to get the value from the board. In his mind, we're paying for this. both time and money. But he would take really challenging things where some CEOs just want to get in a board meeting and get out without too much pain. That's a different dynamic, and maybe that's relevant for them. But if you really to get the value from that board or advisory board, it takes time and preparation to really think about how can they help. And for the people we know that they get the greatest values from those boards or advisory boards, they put a lot of time into thinking about it. They have additional meetings with board members to help them move stuff ahead.
Yeah. And it still comes back to 14X. Like you've got, yes. This applies if it's a mentor relationship, if it's a coach advisor relationship, if it's formal board, if it's an advisory board, governance board, whatever it is. We need to, it could even be an external HR consultant, as you said, but the principle applies across all of these. But then also, as you grow, your needs might change. When you are a startup, when you are a $1 million business, maybe the things that you need then may be different when you're a 10 or a $100 million business.
Maybe. You're so nice sometimes, Brad.
Quite possibly they may be.
Quite possibly, for sure.
Yeah. That's a fair comment, because they are. Well, they really
when you're if you're scaling up and you're getting to your first million as a startup, which is awesome. Advice from someone of $1 billion company may not be helpful because your reality is so starkly different. I mean, there could be conversations that are valuable, but you might surround yourself with people that have got to, 10 or 20 or 30 million. But once you're doing 30 million, someone that's only ever been to 30 can have value. But someone who's done 300, you need someone who's done 300 conceptually. I got a company working with right now, and they're doing, a few hundred million and doing very well. But we're talking about adding additional board members. And ideally, they're well beyond $1 billion in a similar dynamic business, right? Well, I'm talking in revenues, right? That they're well beyond, because that's kind of a next point, because there's different thinking to get to that point. And again, in this case, it's multi-country, multi-location in countries, and over $1 billion, just to be ahead, because it's like at that height of the climb up the mountain, you see and know different things than you do at lower altitudes. And it's not rocket science. That the hard part is that we can sometimes get comfortable, right? Comfortable with the people that are helping us, that help us to get to 10 million or 20 million conceptually. And to then go and say thank you, and go and find people that are 100 or 200 million. It's totally understandable and reasonable if you're respectful about it, and the people would understand. But some people, I think, just hold on a bit too long, or don't even think about it. They don't even think about adding on some people and finding ways to gracefully thank people for what they've done and move to the next thing.
But if you were to select a role, let's say, for example, and I know that we've spoken about this before. If you were to select a role, let's say a head of HR or a sales manager, something like that, and that person has been has done that role in a big multinational, okay, that's not your only criteria. Okay. Now,
no.
If they don't get seduced by the large companies, it's a horrible trap to fall into. Instead,
for sure,
it could be they've worked for 10 companies at or slightly above the size that you are now. So they could have a lot of in-depth experience. So all we're saying is that could still potentially qualify them, because if you took that to the extreme and said, yeah, that was a $500 million company and we're a $5 million company, the dynamics could be so different that you could be doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah, let me clarify what I was saying. In this case is they wanted someone that had been in multi countries, but someone who was a director in a multinational is not the same as the decision maker in a company that is operated. And a $10 billion company operating system often doesn't translate through to where you're at. So it's very dangerous that you just look at people because they're part of a big company. You need to know what was their role. Were they strategic or were they just executing what they were told? There's so many variables.
Who did you report to?
I'm very careful with people when we're looking at, whether it's executives that we hire or advisors, to be careful not to become what I call brand blind. Oh, they were at Apple. They must be amazing, right? Or they, you've got to go through and really see, is their actual relevance, the decisions that they made on a day-to-day basis, consistent with what you need them to be good at?
Yeah,
it's very important. Yeah. The main thing though is that they should make you uncomfortable. They should be, and again, I go back to the simple thing of this race coach. He's like a championship race car driver. I do it for fun and recreation, and for good times with my friends. Multiple steps ahead. And thing is don't go to the convenient person next door. Find someone who's outstanding and is gonna help you master it and probably make you fairly uncomfortable. That's in a way where you like it. So you gotta keep growing to keep growing, right? And you need different thoughts, different people to take you to different levels. And I'll kind of finish my thoughts here with conversation with Ed, who both you and I know, and we're having, and he's always on a different wavelength, but I'm having this conversation. I've been thinking a lot about company structures. And there's always this battle between centralized corporate and autonomous small units. And as we started talking, I had this conversation with Ed, and he has this idea in my head, which we'll explore further. And I'm just like, I love this. He's sending me case studies and lots of other things. I want to learn about this and understand it because it totally opens up my mind. Keeps me fresh and thinking. And in his case, he's already done the research because he's studying these people that would be our equivalent of 14Xers. They've proven it out already in a very, very different way. Anyway, interesting stuff. So should we do a quick summary here, Brad?
Indeed, let's do it. So the overall principle is that we want you to consider finding the best advisors so you can quadruple your IQ. Okay, so first of all, we want to adopt the Jim Collins philosophy, which is first who. Always the question you should ask is first who, and he says then what. But we're intersecting this billionaire mindset. So if you ask fu or who, if you ask who first, don't ask fu. He's in China and he'll take a long time to get back to you. Ask who first, okay, with a billionaire mindset. Okay, they would be saying, who can I get who is the best possible person to solve this problem? Because I don't have any time and I have all the money that I need.
Cheap help is expensive. The best help usually doesn't cost that much more, like minimal. Sometimes it doesn't cost at all. And sometimes it could be the same cost. You just have to dig and find someone who's got more relevant experience for you. And then remember, many masters, those being your peers, will help you for free gladly. It's kind of the favor system. Another CEO or COO or CFO will gladly bend their ear for you. It's just often leaning into your network and asking for people that could help, or just pick up the phone or send an email directly to someone that you think would be relevant.
You've got to look beyond the competence. The competence is, I've got the certificate, I did the course. You've got to look beyond that and think, if I surrounded myself with these 14 X's, everyone who in every facet who's been there, done that, who are highly capable on many levels, it can change the game.
Yep. And then it fits critical. And that's more of a feel thing. If the 14X is a data, the fit is about feel. And at the end of the day, after you work with them on something, do you come away feeling clearer, more confident, energized? Somehow you're up a couple notches and we've gotten great value for that time you have spent with them.
And this doesn't just apply to your lawyer, your accountant, your HR advisor, your leadership team coach, as Kevin and I do, or advisor. This also applies to mentors, informal mentors, or informal advisors, formal boards, governance boards, advisory boards. thinking about all of these facets.
Yeah, and then finally, you got to upgrade as you grow, and you got to keep growing to keep growing. And that means that, you know, these people that help you at one stage, you'll need different people, and sometimes you might just need different perspectives. So that be willing and on the lookout always for excellent people that can help you. Be gracious and thank those that have helped you, but then be open to finding someone new and or different so that you don't get stale or your thinking doesn't get stale. So thanks for listening, you guys. This has been a great conversation. We were looking forward to the show. This has been the Growth Whisperers podcast with Brad Giles, my good friend down there in Perth, Australia. And I'm Kevin Lawrence. For the video version, go to thegrowthwhisperers.com on YouTube, or go to The Growth Whisperers, on YouTube. And then evolutionpartners.com.au is where you can find out more and reach out to Brad if he can assist you. And for myself and my firm, lawrenceandco.com. Have an awesome week. See you next week.